And that's really what this kind of up and coming marketer should be, is like, figure out what questions you need to ask and who you need to ask them. And don't be afraid to have a bit of vulnerability in your knowledge, because nobody's expected to know everything.
Welcome to Demand Bites, the podcast where B2B demand generation leaders find the strategies they need to grow. I'm your host, Ross Howard, Director of Insights at Inbox Insight. And in just 15 minutes, my guests and I will uncover what's broken in the B2B buyer journey and provide real-world strategies you can put to work right away. So whether you're looking for an innovative demand generation technique or expert advice on accelerating sales, this podcast gives you the tools you need to succeed. Ready to identify, educate, and convert your ideal customer profile, or at least learn how other people are doing it? Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode. I have with me today Mike Hicks, as CMO of AppSpace. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, thank you. Great to be here.
Should we maybe talk a little bit about your professional journey and what brought you to AppSpace? I know you were at BlackBerry for a time. What's your marketing story been like?
Yeah, sure. So, I started at a B2B marketing agency, and, I think it taught me a lot of really cool things, particularly around, quality, customer service. And that, I think, has helped me a lot. And I often look for agency experience when we're hiring, regardless of the role, because there's something about that dynamic of multiple competing priorities, timelines that have to be met. And I think a lot of times people that haven't grown up, or that maybe grew up in their career on the client side, they don't understand the importance of timelines as much as the people that have agency experience. So absolutely loved the time that I spent there. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about creative process and, branding from multiple perspectives, and just having access to those types of creative people was really powerful for me. Then spent a bunch of time at BlackBerry, almost kind of grew up in my career there. And it was a really interesting time because we were almost like this mini company inside of this massive global organization. And there was a lot of freedom, but also then a lot of restrictions, because we weren't the major revenue driver for that business at that time. But what's interesting is now enterprise software is what BlackBerry is. But we had the backing of a major global brand, which gave us a lot of leverage when negotiating with vendors, which it was another key skill I think I learned there, is around, really how to drop what you need out of a vendor relationship. And then, from there went on and started leading marketing at a smaller scale up organization, spent a bunch of years there. I moved on to another company called Beezy, and Beezy was actually acquired by AppSpace, which is now where I am and leading that marketing function and just loving every day of it.
So tell me a little bit more about what you're trying to achieve at AppSpace and what type of team you have around you.
So AppSpace, we are a workplace experience platform. And really what that means is we combine the digital workplace, so think things like intranet and internal news, employee communications, with then the physical kind of hybrid office. So space booking, hot desking, visitor management, all those kind of things that happen inside an office. And because it's such a new concept, we spend a lot of time with analysts, a lot of thought leadership around how do we now define this idea of what a workplace experience platform is and get people to buy in? Because oftentimes the buyers for these kind of individual products, they're very siloed and they're across different departments. And we're trying to level up the conversation to say, okay, you need to be thinking broader, because there's a way to integrate all these things together, but it takes kind of a strategic mind. So we spent a lot of time on that, and then plus just standardized stuff on what events do we need to be at, what's our digital marketing strategy going to be at. We're bringing on now a dedicated social media specialist, because I think social is a channel that we've kind of underutilized. So really excited about ramping up that as a channel. And then there's all just the typical stuff around, are we generating enough leads from the right channels? What's our cost per lead? What does the CFO need to know? What does the CRO need to know? How do I help sales accelerate deals and pipeline based on what's already in play? So all the typical stuff that you would expect. But really, I think the big thing for us is category creation and changing the idea of what do people need to be thinking about when it comes to solving the types of business challenges that we solve.
When you try and navigate that, when you are balancing long-term education and thought leadership and some of those more short-term concerns, lead routing, pipeline, where are we going to be in terms of the places where our audience are? How do you balance that as a CMO downwards to decide where you need to move your focus?
Yeah, one of the things that I think, is important for listeners to take away is I often coach the team. Let's not have FOMO about what our competitors are doing. So often you get caught in this chasing of, oh, they're going to be over there, we better do that, be there, or they're doing that, we better do that too. And, I think to answer your question on how do I balance it, I really look at, are we, given the budget that we have, are we generating enough top, middle, bottom to meet the current kind of quarterly KPIs as well as set us up, in the future? So we've got to look at things like what's our typical sales cycle deal length from lead to close, and how much pipeline do we have at any kind of current stage now, and where do we have the biggest need moving forward? Because a lot of marketers, I think, get caught in this kind of like demo call to action cycle and maybe ignore top of funnel and some of that early brand awareness stuff until it's too late. And then they realize, oh, we burned through all our bottom funnel stuff. We have nothing at the top to nurture. So that balance is going to be different, I think, for every organization. And I also think another key consideration is looking at kind of the makeup of your team and where is their expertise? Because there's not going to be a team out there that has expertise at kind of the top level brand awareness, thought leadership, lead gen way up there, and versus middle kind of stuff versus bottom. So you're creating friction if you're trying to force the team to do things that are unnatural against their skill. So as unfortunate as that is, you got to look to say, where's my quickest path to lead gen? And then kind of look at, is that lead gen costing me the right amount of money based on where it sits in terms of top, medium, bottom? And am I generally generating enough at any one of those stages to meet the short-term and the long-term kind of lead conversion goals?
That's really cool. That's an awesome answer. You mentioned earlier, bringing in the right talent if you do need to be somewhere where you maybe don't have those skills at the moment. If you were to give advice, like you say, you're coaching the team, if you were to give advice to somebody who's a demand gen director who has some skill areas around lead generation and market education, but wants to be in the seat you're in, what would be your top priority for that person to invest in?
So I think they got to think about this concept of strategic and operational. Nobody is equally both. And even also on the side of a kind of demand gen manager or director trying to make a level up, is they got to think about what kind of marketing leader are they? Do they slant more towards the brand side, or they slant more towards the analytics side? And really align that to what their business needs. So back to the strategic versus the operational is, are they really good at executing plans, and according to timeline and budget and coordinating activities of multiple people, or are they better at big picture thinking and then need to surround themselves with some of those operational excellence people? And it's a hard thing for people to get their head around, because everyone thinks, oh, I want to do it all. But, really you're going to lean more towards one or the other and make sure that you shore up your weak side with the right type of people around you. Same thing with the brand versus the analytical side is, it doesn't matter which way you lean. Like I lean more towards the analytical side, but through my kind of agency experience and with the people on the team, I can lean on them to help on the brand and the creative side. So I'm not worried about it. And I think the other thing too is that young kind of marketer needs to get out of this idea of they need to have all the answers right away. Ask a bunch of questions and don't be afraid to show some vulnerability in your understanding. That's something that, the more I get in my career, the more I'm just like, it's not a sign of weakness that you don't know. And I think for me, social media is probably the biggest one. It's where I have the least amount of experience, least amount of knowledge. And, now I'm bringing in an expert to say, okay, I need you to drive this channel for us. And, I can ask a bunch of questions, and I think I'm good at asking questions. And that's really what this kind of up and coming marketer should be, is like, figure out what questions you need to ask and who you need to ask them. And don't be afraid to have a bit of vulnerability in your knowledge, because nobody's expected to know everything.
That's awesome. That's really practical. When you're taking a top-down perspective as CMO, how do you decide what to outsource for in specific channels versus what you want to keep close? And how do you manage that process of having to use people who aren't in the org?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of things that happens there. One is, how strategically important is that function to the business? And if the answer is it's highly strategic, you got to ask the question like, well, why is that not currently a role? And there could be a bunch of reasons for that. But if you have a short-term immediate need and you don't have the role, then outsourcing is the easiest way to go. And then you got to start looking at the cost of, how much is that costing me on an annual and monthly basis? And is that cost starting to get more than 1.5 times the cost of the headcount? And if it is, like, if you're up in the, like, this is 2 to 3x my monthly cost if I had the role, then maybe you got to say, I need to build a business case to hire this role. I think there's some other things around there too, of like, is this the type of function that requires multiple people at that agency to do? Or is it kind of like a highly effective single person could do it? So, a perfect example is take PR. You may outsource your PR because even though they're giving you maybe, a few hours a week of time, and it's multiple people that are quickly able to do a whole bunch of things. And you might say, okay, I will make that trade-off on letting them do that function a couple times a week, because I don't have that requirement as a full-time thing in my business today. So that could be fine. And it might break your kind of 1.5x cost rule, but maybe that's okay because of the expertise and specialization of it. Another one could be like event management. You might outsource that because you don't do very many events and you can't justify the headcount. One thing I think you got to look at though is the amount of money that I'm going to spend with that vendor, where does that put me in their priority list? Because oftentimes you might think, oh, as a percentage of my budget, I'm spending a lot of money with this vendor. But they might say, well, you are at the bottom of the rung, which means now you're getting most likely the most junior account management employee servicing your account. And maybe if it came down to a timeline decision between you and someone else, you're going to lose that battle, in which case now your timelines are at risk because they can't deliver. So you got to really look at that too, because you don't necessarily want to be the top client, because it's kind of like buying the most expensive house on the street. But you also don't want, to be at the bottom, because now you're at the mercy of every other client that sits above you. So figuring out where you want to land with that particular function and that vendor, I think, is important. The other thing is, how long is it going to take that vendor to ramp up in their understanding of your business and your industry? And this is one where, take something like content. A lot of people have to outsource content. And if you invest in that relationship, then it can pay off, incredibly, right? For the first several months, it's like you're going to basically have to rewrite everything they do. But if they're smart and you've got, a good team and they're prioritizing your work, they're going to learn and they'll become incredibly effective for you, to the point that you may say, okay, long-term content outsource is the way to go. But you got to be willing to put in that time. And if you're just looking for, oh, we have an immediate need for something, chances are you're going to be disappointed, because they won't understand your business or your industry enough to deliver something effective the first time. So I think those are a bunch of the things that you look at. And, also too, is like, it takes time to manage a vendor. And do you even have somebody in-house that's equipped to manage them effectively and hold them accountable and brief them and all those types of things too? So it's not necessarily a black and white thing. And I think you'll kind of go through phases of outsource versus insource. 2 years ago, we brought in digital marketing, and it's been the best decision that we've ever made. And we still outsource today our SEO. We have outsourced some content, but we're ramping up internal hires now for our content. Like I said, we're bringing in a social media specialist dedicated just to that, which is previous years we've outsourced that. So we're kind of going through this change of different things are becoming more important. So we're willing to bring it in. So we have dedicated people, addressing those priorities.
I've just seen the time. I've had a blast talking to you, Mike, but I feel like I should let you go back to your day. But thanks so much. I've really enjoyed this. Where can people find out more about you, Mike?
About me, you can look me up on LinkedIn, Mike Hicks, CMO of AppSpace. And then for AppSpace, if you're dealing with an intranet that is lacking engagement, or you're struggling with getting news out to employees, particularly frontline workers, if you're working through your hybrid and return to office strategy and are struggling with hot desking and conference room booking and visitor management, check out AppSpace. That's what we do, workplace experience platform, appspace.com, and we'd love to chat.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Great. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And that wraps up today's episode of Demand Bites. Thanks for listening. I hope the insights provided today are able to help you power up your own demand generation efforts. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, make sure to hit subscribe so you're always up to date with the latest strategies. If you're looking for more insight, stay connected with Inbox Insight on LinkedIn and join a network of marketing leaders driving the future of demand gen.